Hello and welcome to another edition of Critical Q&A, the show where I answer your questions based on what you've left for me in the comment section below on my Critical Q&A shows or have sent to me by email at askchrisshelton@gmail.com. Okay, a couple of things. I think it was last week that I talked about the changes that have been happening with the fee structure in Patreon, and that is canceled. That is, they actually listened. To their credit, the Patreon CEO, Jack, whatever his name is, put out an email this week saying that they were not implementing those changes. There is not going to be any change to the system or the service fees or any of that. So that is very good news. I guess all the tweets and emails and everything reached them, and they realized that they had not consulted with the creators and how the creators on Patreon who actually make up their product actually felt about that, and that was very refreshing and something new and different. I wish YouTube would also sort of take a page from Patreon's rollout there, because they tend to not listen too much to their creators, at least as far as I can tell as a low-level creator. And the input I have given YouTube has meant practically nothing. So we'll see anyway what happens with that. And there's a little bitterness there because YouTube continues to flag my videos as advertiser unfriendly. And then you have to ask for a manual review, and then usually after the review, then the video is okayed for advertising. In other words, you know, so that I can receive some revenue on it. And sometimes that flies, and you know, sometimes it doesn't, and it's just been a little frustrating because my content is educational and informative, and is not I do not run a hate site here, and I think that, you know, everyone should be potentially able to listen to what I have to say without you know, being offended or freaked out, or you know, I'm not promoting cults or hate or anything like that. So it's a little frustrating to be at the receiving end of YouTube's algorithm, which consistently flags my videos as not advertiser friendly, and every time I have to ask them, hey guys, hello, come on, you know. So I don't know what the hell's going on with YouTube, but it's just an ongoing struggle, and I'm just bitching about it to you guys because you probably have some input and care about that matter. I did want to, though, acknowledge that, you know, on Patreon, some supporters come and some supporters go, and I don't know if I lost folks specifically because of the threatened changes that occurred, or if there were other reasons, but I did want to acknowledge that I gained some people too, and I wanted to acknowledge you guys as supporters of this channel. That was Brinkley Sharp, Jessica Freeman, Tandra Ford, let's see, Yvonne Woolman upped her monthly amount. Thank you very much, as did Colette Mallet. Thank you very much for your ongoing support. Let's see, Ashley Kruger and David Overton. Okay, I wanted to acknowledge you guys as having signed on here in December. Thank you very much for your support and for helping to keep this channel going by allowing me to have the time necessary to do the work that I do here. All right, all that being said, let's go ahead and, oh, one last thing is I am wearing my Star Wars shirt today in honor and recognition of the new Star Wars The Last Jedi movie, which I saw opening night, first show here in Denver. And it was meh, you know, it was all right. It wasn't bad. It wasn't like a horrible, awful movie as far as I'm concerned, although I am seeing some hate towards it. I thought that it was slow in the pacing. I thought that needed better editing. But I was kind of okay with how the whole thing ended, and so I was kind of okay with the whole movie. But that's my spoiler-free review. I'm not going to say anything else about it because I want you guys to check it out, and then we'll have more deep conversations about what was really wrong with that movie later. All right, so let's go ahead and get on with your questions now. Roman Kolosinek. How does the Church of Scientology decide where to establish a presence in a new area? Scientology critics like yourself, Mike Rinder, and Leah Remini state the church is after money, and that one needs a lot of money in order to go up the bridge. Well, Mike Rinder posted a poster of speakers coming from the Cincinnati org to the Cleveland Mission on December 2nd. The Scientology Cleveland mission is in Parma, a suburb of Cleveland and as blue collar as you can get. One would think they would try to establish themselves either downtown or in a white collar suburb. If the Church of Scientology has all this money, then renting or paying for property in a high rent, high priced district should not be any problem. All right, Roman, well, I'm glad you emailed me about this question because it indicates that you actually have no idea how the missions are different from the orgs of Scientology. So let's talk about this. I have talked about how there are, I've put the entire hierarchy and organizational structure of Scientology into video form as a very early video I did years ago called Scientology's Organizational Madness. But let's talk about, in more detail, about the difference between a Church of Scientology, which is a mission of Scientology, versus a Church of Scientology, which is an org, or what is called a Class 5 org, which is your city-level church. Okay, I've referred to those as city-level churches, but I can see how that could be confused with missions. The way a mission starts is there's a mission holder. And that is a Scientologist who has decided that he individually wants to get the rights to deliver Dianetics and Scientology. He wants to sell Dianetics and Scientology materials and deliver certain Scientology services. And that is a franchise operation. And it's run by the mission holder who buys the rights to deliver those services and sell those materials from the Church of Scientology. He's licensed by the church as an individual to start a group. It's on him to rent the location, to hire the staff, to implement Scientology policy in such a way that he will run his mission according to how Scientology wants it to be run. But Scientology, the management hierarchy of Scientology, does not issue week-to-week orders to the mission holder in the same way that the orgs are managed. Okay, it's a much lighter touch with missions because the mission holder is basically like, hey, you make it or break it. It's all up to you. He pays an initial amount of money, and I think it's in the order of $25,000 to $30,000 for what's called a mission starter package. Those are the legal contracts that he signs, and then a basic set of Dianetics books, Dianetics auditing introductory kits, Scientology basic books. I think there's an e-meter thrown in there. Films, there's a film station that is set up, and it might even be more than $30,000 at this point. It might even be as high as $40,000. I'm not totally sure, but I do know it's at least $25,000. And you get a film projector set up in system, right? And with all of this, it's on you to go open up a mission, and you'll get help from the Scientology Missions International branch of the Scientology hierarchy. Okay, Scientology Missions International, or SMI as it's called in Scientology, is a Sea Org outfit. It's a Sea Org management unit that is responsible for selling people these mission starter packages. So they try to find Scientologists and sell them these things to get them to open up a mission. But they don't really care where the missions are opened or what part of town, or they don't really have a lot of say in that. It's up to the mission holder to do that. So this place in Parma was chosen by the guy who runs it in Parma, who's probably lives in Parma. And that's probably why he set it up there. Okay? Scientology doesn't pay for the building, doesn't do any fundraising for it. That's not how missions work. Okay, the missions are a whole different thing from ideal orgs and the organizational structure that we've talked about in the Class 5 orgs. Sea Org members do not regularly go to missions. They might go every now and again, but they're not routinely going in the same way that they go to the orgs. And Sea Org members don't come down and run missions. There have only been a handful of cases where there was sort of a big bunch of missions in the 1980s in California that were forcibly converted into organizations. Scientology does have, the Church of Scientology does have the right to do that. They can come in and basically just take it away, and that's probably in some fine print in the legal contracts that they have with the mission holders. I've never looked at the contract, so I'm just guessing at that. But I do know for a fact that Scientology, the Church of Scientology International, has sent Sea Org members in 2 missions that were troublesome for some reason, and has taken them over and has converted them into Class 5 orgs. That's happened that's what happened with Santa Barbara, San Diego, Pasadena, the Church of Scientology, the Valley. Those all used to be missions. Orange County used to be a mission, and they were all converted to orgs in the early 1980s. That also happened with Los Gatos in California later, when I was in management. That mission was taken over and converted into an org because the mission holder and the people who were running the mission had somehow created some kind of massive flap, big problem for the church. And so the Sea Org went in there and just took it over. But normally speaking, that's very unusual. That's not the normal course of events. Generally, the idea, or the sort of evolutionary idea with Scientology missions, is that a mission holder will get a Scientology mission started, build it up, get it going, make it really successful, be making money from it, because the mission holder has the right to make money from his mission. It's a profit activity, and they only have to send a certain percentage of their regular weekly income up as tithing or licensing fees, whatever they want to call it, to Scientology International. As long as Scientology International is getting its money, they leave the missions alone pretty much. And so that's kind of how missions operate, right, as far as I understand it. Now, since the 1980s, missions have been on the decline. They got a really bad name in the 1970s and 80s with Scientology International and with the Sea Org because they were so successful. Because there was a hands-off approach to dealing with missions, and Hubbard said, yeah, just let them, they'll make or break themselves. As long as we're getting our percentage from them every week, we don't really have a lot to say about the missions. Well, the missions were thriving, and the orgs weren't. And that was a big sore spot with the Sea Org, right, and with the churches, right? So you had in Los Angeles, you had all these outlying missions, like there was one in Burbank, there was one in Santa Barbara, San Diego. These places, Pasadena, they were thriving. When my parents were on staff in the 70s, they were on staff at the Pasadena mission. And it was a going concern. They were delivering 1,000 hours of auditing a week. They had staff. They were getting paid. The place looked pretty swanky. And the Sea Org just hated that, right? And so certain elements in management, started telling Hubbard, hey, these missions are off the rails. They're ripping you off. Hubbard, rah, they're ripping me off, rah, and take them down. And then there was this entire fiasco that happened in the early 80s where the mission network was, subjugated and punished by the Sea Org for being successful and for basically doing exactly what Hubbard said. Now, the mission holders were also doing some other creaky, not so good things, like setting up their own credit union in California and doing some other nonsense, right? So there wasn't like it was good guys and bad guys. It was all kind of just, guys. But that's what happened. And ever since that whole takeover, and ever since that whole beatdown that happened with the missions in the 80s, it's been pretty hard to sell mission packages, and there has not been a lot of effort on the part of Scientology to do that. You'll get little peaks every now and again, but for the most part, missions are just kind of ignored and not really paid a lot of attention to. Certainly when I was in management from 1995 until 2003 or so, missions were just, maybe one would open, a new mission would open in the West US maybe once a year or something. It was not common to see new missions opening up at all. And they'd close just as fast as they were opening because guys would, go off to try to make it happen and then fail miserably more often than not. And these days, I don't even know, how you'd even begin to start a mission. Because if you start calling it Scientology, then, you're just instantly setting yourself up to fail. But they're out there and they keep trying. And so in terms of addressing all the points of your question, the missions are never going to be subsidized by management. They're never going to be, there's no fundraising that goes on for missions. No money from Scientology International is going to come down to a mission to get it better quarters or tell them what to do as far as where they're going to move. So that's why, what you're seeing there in Cincinnati is very different from the org situation that I talk about here on this channel, and you might have seen Mike talk about or Leah talk about, and I hope that that's now clearer to you what that's all about. Lori Pacheco, I have a question that I hope is not too personal. I mean, no disrespect to you, Chris. In Scientology, statistics are very important. Whether you are considered a good person or not is dependent on production and expansion. The work you do now is also very statistics driven. How many views, likes, shares, and pledges? Do you have trouble applying old feelings to new circumstances? Do you avoid looking at your stats on Thursdays or have other protocols to avoid doing what Scientology told you to do and think vis-a-vis statistics? Thanks for the question, Lori. It's not too personal at all. No, I do not run my channel on statistics. And on YouTube, they're called analytics, is how they refer to this, the section where you can go and look at your views and dislikes and likes and subscribers and all kinds of watch time metrics and different graphs that they show you, and you can compare and contrast and do all this stuff. And I've dived in there and looked at that, but frankly, it's mostly just kind of confusing to me. How the analytics of YouTube actually work, what's important and what's not. YouTube has updated its algorithm over the years, even in the few years that I've been a YouTuber, which is really only the last 3 or 4. They've changed how the algorithm judges what is and isn't a good video and what videos get put up in the trending page and that sort of thing. So I tend to just really not pay a lot of attention to it. The thing that drives my channel is the comments and feedback that I receive from you guys. The overall number of views that I get on videos tells me how popular a subject matter might be. Sometimes it's a little disappointing when I put a lot of hard work into a video and it only gets a few hundred views, doesn't even break 1,000. That's generally for me a gauge that I have failed somehow in getting across what I'm trying to talk about. And I understand that, on this channel, people are mainly here to hear about me talking about Scientology. But I think I've shown that I have good things to say about lots of other things too, so I try to broaden that out. But it is what it is. I've built this channel on what I've built it on, and so, some of the other things that I have, that I talk about aren't so popular. Whatever. That's kind of how I kind of gauge things. I look at the likes and the dislikes on videos, but generally my ratio is really good on the likes to dislikes thing. And so if I get a substantial number of dislikes on something, I either know that I really screwed up, which really hasn't happened too much, or somebody is actually on some kind of roll to make that particular video somehow be disliked or something, right? And that's only happened once or twice. So it's not, the likes dislikes thing is not a huge thing for me. I like it when you like my videos, but it's not something I particularly am watching very, very closely. And of course, Patreon and my Patreon support. Well, that's just I like to get Patreon supporters, and I sort of watch, when there's additions and subtractions and stuff from that, and try to look and see, what notes did people leave as to when they are, taking away their pledges of support from Patreon. Why did that happen? Was it something I said? Something I did? I try to watch for that. But there's no graphs in Chris Shelton's life anymore. There's no statistics. There's none of that. I'm not using any Scientology ethics conditions or any of that. I hated doing that when I was in Scientology. That was never something that I particularly enjoyed doing. I thought that when I was a manager and I was looking over the statistics of the orgs that I was managing, there were comparatives and contrasting of statistics one to another that would tell you things about the organizations. You could use those statistics to kind of gauge how things were going, and then you use the data to find out why. the way the mantra in Scientology is the statistics tell you what's happening, and then the data analysis and the evaluation tells you why it's happening and what to do about it. And there's a certain degree of workability to that system. I did manage to turn some things around statistically in organizations as a manager, and that was how I lived and died, so I had a lot of incentive to do that. But personally, when it came to Thursday at 2 and I had to, look at my own statistics and write up a condition of what I was going to do for this following week, my battle plan is what it's called, to revert the condition if it was down or keep it going up if it was up. I hated that. Most of that was cut and paste from the week before. And it was, just reorganizing the targets on my battle plan to keep doing basically the same thing I was doing. I'd say for the last years that I was a manager and really being watched on what my battle plan was, I just kind of cut and pasted it. It was just sort of a dial it in sort of thing. I wasn't really very enamored with the whole statistical situation and condition situation as a Sea Org member. And then, once I got on the RPF and got off the RPF and was traveling around and stuff, weekly conditions again were just pretty cut and paste. So that was kind of my attitude then. After I got out of it, I couldn't, I lost no sleep not using any of that. And I therefore was able to shed thinking with all of that stuff pretty quickly. I still have a habit when I look at my YouTube analytics, for example, on a long term, of looking at a graph going up or level or going down, and just automatically assigning a condition to it. But that's just a mental, habit. That's almost muscle memory for my brain. It's not like I'm thinking, ooh, wow, that's an emergency. I really need to apply the emergency condition to that. That's not how I think anymore. So that's kind of how I manage things. I know that there are other YouTubers who pay a lot of attention to analytics, and I've looked at videos and tried to get trained up a bit on how to do that, but frankly, it all just goes over my head. And so the main thing I do to try to keep this channel going and keep the quality high is I just concentrate on putting out good content for you guys, and that's my number one priority on the channel. Kath T. You've said that homosexuals never be allowed on the OT levels, but do you know if Scientologists have become convinced, or convinced their auditor, that they've been cured of homosexuality and then allowed to move up the bridge? Just to be clear, I don't believe in people being cured of homosexuality, nor that they need to be. Hey, Kath, of course, I'm sure you don't have anything about homosexuality or any of that just by asking that question, so no worries there. Yes, to answer your question directly, yes, I did see instances of people cured of their homosexuality due to Scientology auditing. The idea was to audit the gay away, and there were various Scientology processes and procedures that be used in order to address people's aberrations, as they call it in Scientology, on their second dynamic, meaning the area of their life dealing with sex, family, and sexual matters. So, sometimes it was addressed with evil intentions, stripping away evil intentions a person had in the area of sex. Sometimes it was addressed with Dianetic auditing. There's a kind of auditing called expanded Dianetics that deals with, it's a kind of a high-level Dianetic auditing that was developed in the early 1970s, which uses an e-meter and was directed to find major instances of psychosis and evil intentions and evil purposes on a case using Dianetics procedure. All right, so I've seen expanded Dianetics used because Hubbard was of the idea in the technical materials of Scientology that homosexuality is aberrant behavior and is driven by a sort of an evil idea, right? And at its core, there's this like evil idea to do away with the race or the species, right? Because you're not procreating. That's the main reason Scientologists have a problem with it, is because the idea for them is that by being homosexual, you are going against your gender, you're going against your biology, you're going against the whole purpose of being alive as a member of a species. right? And so therefore there must be some serious, mental stuff going on, which means that there must be serious instances in the past of you having done some things that were pretty catastrophic in terms of destroying a race or a species or something like that, that causes you to feel the impulse or need to continue acting in such an aberrant behavior that's destructive towards the good of the species, okay? Another way that's addressed, though, is also with valence auditing, right? In Scientology, the word valence is a term to describe a personality or a package personality that a person could put on or take off like a coat. It's like you're in a valence. That valence is not your personality, it's somebody else's personality, right? When you refer to your character or personality or who you are, you don't refer to your valence, you say that's who you are, that's you. But if you start acting like your mom or your dad or your boss or somebody else, then you're in their valence. You're taking on their personality traits, right? And Hubbard said that this would happen all the time. People do this constantly, right? And you do see it. I mean, it's not like it's, like this is just a fantasy idea. I mean, you see kids who look and act exactly like their parents, have eye problems, have this, have that. And I'm sure there's a certain amount of genetics to that, of course. But there's also the fact that you're being raised by these people, so you act like those people, right? And that's so you could say that a child could be in the valence of one or both of his parents, for example, or you might see some kid who gets bullied and then he starts acting like a bully, and so in Scientology parlance, you would say that victimized kid has gone into the valence of the bully and now bullies other people, and so therefore that would be aberrant behavior. You'd want to deal with that. You'd want to get the kid to get back into being just himself. So there are processes that Hubbard developed in order to find and sort of, separate a person from other personalities or other valences. And there's an assumption made in Scientology that if you're homosexual, you are in the valence of someone who represents the opposite gender. And that might be another way of tackling or dealing with homosexuality or bisexuality. So all of this, of course, is kind of nonsense because at least from my own personal perspective, I've come to realize after leaving Scientology that homosexuality is often not a choice. And people are just born with certain proclivities and ideas and attitudes about sex and sexual behavior, and that's just kind of where they're coming from. And it's, as far as I'm concerned, not my business or yours or anybody's to dictate to them how or why they feel that way, how they should feel, what they should be doing. It's nobody's business, right? But there are people who have, mostly a religious mindset who feel that it's a violation of God's law or natural law or whatever, and that's kind of where Hubbard was coming from as well. That it is a violation of being a good member, good procreating survival member of the species. Okay, so that's kind of the whole attitude about it in Scientology, and that's why they look down on it, and that's how they try to address it. So I hope that is helpful. And yes, I've seen some people respond to that in such a way that they said that they had been cured. And whether that really worked or not, well, I guess you could ask Catherine Bell. Nick C. Until 2011 or so, Scientology used to put up an elaborate Christmas display called L. Ron Hubbard's Winter Wonderland, if memory serves, on Hollywood Boulevard in Los Angeles. A lot of nighttime work went into this, and if critics are to be believed, occupational safety was a big issue, and a lot of work on the site was done by Sea Org members who were on the RPF. Are there any personal or perhaps secondhand anecdotes you can share about this, including the reasons for the eventual discontinuation of this tradition? Hey Nick, yeah, I actually do have some personal experience from this when I was on the RPF. Now, I looked this up, and according to what the church is putting out, the Winter Wonderland did not stop in 2011. It's been something ongoing ever since 1983. Maybe they skipped some years, that's entirely possible, but as of now, they are promoting that they're doing Winter Wonderland this year. So That's still up and out there. And yeah, the RPF are definitely, the workforce that was used in order to set it up and break it down. And we went out there many cold nights because we were out there late at night, early in the morning. And we were, OSHA standards to address that particular issue were kind of optional on the RPF. It's not that we were not aware of them, and it's not that we weren't told to follow them, but in the haste and flurry and hurry of getting all the work done that we were doing, and the intense, production demand to go, taka, 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 let's go. You could never stand and be idle. You could never be cautious and reserved and thinking about what job, how should we get this job done. It was dive in and just do it, always. So in that kind of hectic, frantic work environment, OSHA standards, are sort of, I guess, if I have time for them and if I think of them. So you have guys up there, nailing things and they're standing up on a roof and balanced precariously on a ladder, or somebody's holding them up, or all kinds of goofy stuff that goes on the RPF in order to get the work done in a timely fashion. And, safety considerations are always secondary to getting the product, right? I think one time, this is probably embodied, not on a Winter Wonderland thing, but just to kind of get the attitude of the RPF across. Very early on, like in the first week or two that I was there, we were carrying Egyptian style, meaning we were lugging this thing up stairs, right? There were about 5 or 6 of us carrying an extremely heavy, fully built piece of furniture, I believe it was. And it was a very intricate piece of furniture. It was very nicely put together. It had been painted and lacquered, and it was nice, right? And it was also really heavy. And we were carrying this thing from the second floor mill down to the ground floor for transport. And it had not been packaged up yet or put in plastic and cardboard. That was being done down at the ground level. So we're carrying this thing down there, and I'm banging against the wall, and this thing is, and my hand is between the piece of furniture and the concrete wall as we're navigating the stairs, going around from one stairwell down to another. And my hand's in the way, and it's about to be crushed. And this guy says, "Better your hand than this piece of furniture," right? And I was like a little horrified by that statement, and I did not agree with it, but I was, having to carry this thing, or being part of the team carrying it. And it was, made pretty clear by that and the other looks that I got from the other guys that if I screwed this up and, damaged this piece of furniture in any way, this tiniest little ding, and it would have been my ass. So that's the attitude about, things in the RPF, is you're the expendable one, not the piece of furniture or whatever it is that you've made or whatever work you're doing. So that very much carried over into Winter Wonderland. This joyous, happy Christmas setup that the church does in order to draw people in and convince people that Scientology is A-OK and is in there with the community, always part of, a productive and friendly part of the community, right? Which is just total nonsense because they can't even be friendly and nice with themselves and with their own people, much less with the community at large. It's all just a big show. So that's what I can say about Winter Wonderland. Brittany Gatchell. You've spoken about how recently, in the last 10 to 20 years, that OTs have been sent back down the bridge to do lower levels. How does this work with staff and Sea Org members? It doesn't make sense to me from an operations perspective. That would be in the interest of a business to retrain employees on steps that have already been done. I'm guessing this doesn't happen to staff and Sea Org members. Does it? And if it doesn't happen, what is the justification? Money? For public to redo levels? Hey Brittany, thanks for the question. It's a good one. And this is where I get to talk about and show you guys, do a little show and tell here. So in July 2nd, 1993, I got this clear bracelet. I went clear, and I wore this thing for years, right? I was very, very proud of it. And I was a staff member at the time. And then I joined the Sea Org in 1995, and I was a clear Sea Org member all the way up until about 2003 or 4, when I had my clear status revoked, just like every other Sea Org member and staff member who had achieved the state of clear, or almost all of us. Because we were being treated the exact same way as the public. The technical standards of Scientology, whatever they are, okay, whatever David Miscavige says is a clear or an OT or a purification rundown completion or whatever he says applies equally to all Scientologists, whether they're paying for their services or whether they're doing them as staff or public. When you're a staff member or a Sea Org member, then you get your services for free. So it's not, but the thing you're getting out of the Sea Org members and the staff members is not money. You're getting their time and their energy and their dedication, right? So Miscavige doesn't care about the staff or the Sea Org members as long as they keep working. And if they have to redo their lower levels, well, that just keeps them busy for longer too. Because the whole incentive of Miscavige to make people redo these lower levels is because he doesn't have anything else for them to do. He's run out of answers. He's run out of levels. He's not supposed to be the source of Scientology, right? He's only supposed to be the emissary, or the guy running the show who is using what Hubbard left him to keep the show going. Well, Hubbard didn't leave him OT levels 9 through 15. So he's got this grade chart that says that there are these OT levels, but he doesn't have them. So what's he going to do? Well, he's going to, instead of inventing them, apparently instead what he's going to do is he's going to make people rehash all these lower levels and make them pay for the privilege if they're public. But if they're staff, whatever, just go back and do them again. And for staff members, it takes much longer than it does for public because they don't have the same number of resources available to them, and they don't have as much time on their hands as public people do. So it's really a real problem for them. But as a Sea Org member, when I left the Sea Org after 17 years of duty working for the Sea Org, I had been put back at the same place on the bridge that I was literally the day I walked into Scientology when I was 15 years old. I was going to have to redo everything. And that was just how it was. So that's how Miscavige is running things, and I think I've said why I believe that is the case, so there's your answer. Thunder! Lightning! It's time for Flash Answers. Logamug. What was the last Scientology viewpoint / approach you removed from your life? Okay, well maybe there's a long answer to this, but I'm just doing this as a flash answer right now. So the answer is the idea that saving the world is possible and that it's something I should spend my time working on. That is the last thing, and it's pretty recent, that I've kind of been stripping away out of my head. Anyway, that's the answer to the question. Guardian of Fire 666. So, do they tell anyone that he is initially a science fiction writer? Just curious. Yeah, Scientology is quite proud of the fact that L. Ron Hubbard was a writer of some renown in the field of pulp fiction. And science fiction, he keeps getting labeled with this thing of being a science fiction writer. I think we really need to be clear on the fact that the majority of what Hubbard wrote was not science fiction. And it was not even his most favored field to write in. He wrote across lots of different genres, and he was more into the adventure stories than he was into science fiction. Inquisitor 6321. There's a rumor out there that Quentin Tarantino is going to direct the next Star Trek, J.J. Abrams' version. It's supposedly already rated R. What are your thoughts and considerations about this? My thoughts and considerations? How Scientology of you to ask me that. It's not already rated R because movies aren't rated until they're made and reviewed by the MPAA, but I hear it's going to be kind of interesting. Being a Quentin Tarantino movie, I can only imagine that the dialogue will be probably amazing. I haven't been so impressed by the recent Star Trek TV show. In fact, I was very unimpressed by it, and I haven't gone out of my way to watch more than the first 2 episodes. So I'm hoping that Quentin Tarantino can bring something back to it that it had, which somehow has been lost in the more recent movies and TV versions of the show. I'm kind of old school that way. To me, Star Trek is embodied and epitomized by the Star Trek original series and by the movies that starred the original cast, most especially Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan, which, as far as I'm concerned, is the most honest, true Star Trek that was ever made. Okay guys, so that's our show for this week. Thanks for hanging in there to the bitter end with me. I hope you found the answers I gave interesting, informative, educational, and entertaining. And I look forward to much more coming up this holiday season. By the way, if you haven't ever seen it, I did make a video about Scientology holidays last year, and you can find that on my channel if you're curious about how Scientologists spend their holiday season. All right, I'll see you guys next week. Bye-bye.